Hello, and welcome to the Strategic Partnerships podcast series. My name is Sarah Jabber, Manager Business Development at UIIN, and your host for today. In this series, we will be exploring different elements related to strategic partnerships between universities and external stakeholders, whether that is companies, government bodies, not-for-profits, or societal stakeholders. At UIIN, we work closely with organizations to support them in developing a more coordinated approach to their partnerships. And we know firsthand that there are many challenges, such as funding, timescales, internal bureaucracy, lack of communication, or lack of structures, awareness, and processes when it comes to driving and supporting partnerships. While there is no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to partnerships, there are definitely learnings and guiding principles that can be taken from both successful and unsuccessful partnerships to inform each organization's approach and strategy. In today's episode, you'll get to hear from university and industry professionals around how they approach their partnerships and overcome some of these challenges. Today, I am joined by Arturo Pizano, Program Manager of University Collaboration at Siemens, Georgia von Guttner, Director of Innovation Precincts at the University of Melbourne, Robert Lorentz, Director of Strategy and University Engagement at 3M's Corporate Research Laboratory, and Leah Burton, Director of the Partnership Office at North Carolina State University. I hope you enjoy this podcast and gain some new insights. Don't forget to share this episode with your colleagues and leave us any comments that you might have.
One thing I'd like to talk about is the fact relationships form because of either personal connections, sometimes it's organic growth, but sometimes it's purposeful. And as an organization, if you're trying to have this coordinated approach towards your partnerships, how do you bring the two together? So how do you maintain this, these connections on a personal scale, let's say with an academic or with a researcher within your organization with someone external, but also try to have this coordinated strategic approach. So top down and bottom up, I guess.
I can start on that, Sarah. As much as we've been talking about university industry partnerships, that which you just described as a partnership in and of itself. And so we have to create partnerships internally in order to partner externally there. And so we try to come along with faculty members, no matter where they are at their stage of research development or in their stage of talking with a company or multiple companies. And so, we always stress that they are the subject matter expert in whatever area it may be, but that we help on the relationship management part, and we may be able to bring industry partners into the equation, especially when it's a consortium or a developing institute, for instance. And so what we try to do is to be that centralized resource for our faculty and for all of their colleagues, but create a really strong internal partnership and value proposition for what it is that we bring to the university, so that we all can then partner externally. And it's never my goal to dampen any of those conversations that our researchers are having with their colleagues in industry, because those can be some of the very strongest ways to engage. And then the question is, how can we assist that so that we turn it into something that truly is strategic for either that individual researcher and or the university? And so I think it's all about establishing that internal partnership, and I'm guessing it's like that for our colleagues here at Siemens and 3M as well.
Maybe I can add a little bit from the industry side. So I think you touched on a very an issue we deal almost on a day-to-day basis. First of all, in terms of the organic growth and some relationships that happen just by chance. Actually, many years ago, we started this strategic program because our approach to universities at that time was basically built on relationships, and we had many agreements, and we ended up doing an analysis, this is again maybe more than 10 years ago, that showed that we had partnerships with hundreds of universities on an average $40,000 or something like that. So that didn't make sense. Having said that, I think the important aspect for us is to recognize how our relationship with universities map into the way that we do R&D. In Siemens's case, we have a bottom-up approach to identifying, well, to doing R&D in general. We don't have top-down university relation program, programs for universities where we would do, for example, open calls for proposals. So it all starts at the research group level. Research group level is the smallest entity. And at the end, the topics that our researchers the areas that our researchers are working on are not in isolation. They are writing papers, they are participating in conference, so they have that natural way of interacting. I think where we meet, and perhaps where the top-down approach comes in, and then he mentioned it before, is where we actually pull the researchers to work with certain universities where we have developed master research agreements or strategic relationships. And that's just a mapping into the way that we do R&D. One thing I mentioned before is the flexibility. Over time, we developed actually multiple ways of working with universities, and in some sense, the master research agreements are focused on strategic partner universities, but they are not the only way that we work with universities. We work with universities in government-funded research. So sometimes our researchers identify a faculty member that is working in an area of common interest, and they go after grants from DOE, from DOD. And then we also have, and then you also mentioned the consortia. That is also one way in which our researchers can interact with faculty from many different universities when we join, for example, manufacturing institutes or some centers, ERC centers, for example, that cover multiple universities. So it's a challenge, and many times we have to stop the research and say, sorry, sometimes it's just very pragmatical. We don't have time to develop to create a new research agreement in time for us to be able to use the funding that is available in a particular fiscal year. So that's more or less how we approach that issue in Siemens.
Georgia?
If I can add, again, from a university perspective, particularly where there's been organic growth, we can see that often, again, based around a particular set of relationships. And this is where sort of resilience to the relationship starts to play in, because if it's been centered around an individual, of course, you have, just natural attrition or turnover within organizations, so it can be quite fragile. But we've found that where we've had relationships by now, the university has partnered with some of the key organizations, some of the key technology-driven organizations in the state and in the country over many decades. And often that has been through multiple relationships, but again, serendipitous along the lines that both Arturo and Leah have described. But now we're starting to see increasingly a desire recognition from a strategic perspective, certainly at the university level, but also with the partners to convert that serendipity, and if you will, like even allowing, previously it was almost down to the chemistry of where there were good working relationships, to put it onto a much more planned strategic level. And in Australia, it's as much about the opportunity for technology development as it is for access to talent. And a real challenge actually that we have in Australia is that many of the large complex organisations that are technology driven or innovation driven are in fact multinationals. So they're here to sell, not their centre of R&D is often offshore. So it's a real challenge for Australian universities to find those innovation driven enterprises that have the capacity and appetite to undertake R&D and to partner with us with R&D. So that's an area of key focus for us, to identify those organisations. And again, we're seeing, particularly in recent times, and this is where the impact of the pandemic we can see, there's almost some of the reversals of globalisation, greater emphasis around regionalisation, and an opportunity to partner with us around particular, whether it be taking those early stage discovery, just as it moves in along its impact development pathways onto the cusp of commercialisation, where it can support product development that is relevant to our regional context. So here in Australia, we're an excellent springboard across all of Asia. As we were coming onto the call, we were talking about the travails of time zones. And here we are literally crossing the date line as we speak, as it's the 3rd of November here in Australia. And so by being based here, by undertaking your R&D programs here, not only is the sort of the Asia Pacific, but the enormous Asian market accessible to those multinationals. And we're seeing that increasingly here, a much more programmed approach. Speaking of resilience, and I think Leah, where you were going on that is really important. So we have significant teams now in the university who are dedicated to partnering very much with the academy, who is on its own journey and culture change towards, in our case, more applied research, and recognizing, and Arturo, to your point, that industry are excellent research partners, and those joint publication opportunities and those impact opportunities from an academic career perspective are extremely rich and exciting as well. So it's not all just about what is the give or what is applied and makes an impact out in society, but also how industry, government, social sector partners really deeply enrich the research environment and the student experience. So that's been a really purposeful body of work internally for us as well.
Denny, if I can ask you, how do you as an organization choose or decide which universities you will work with? Do you have criteria you look for, or does it also maybe develop a bit more organically based on individual relationships? Do you have something specific that you look for?
Well, we do, but I would like to say that, one size does not fit all. We will be opportunistic in a sense of going to where the research is being done. So if there's a professor or a group working in a certain area that we're interested in, that's where we'll go, whether it's a large university, a small college, US, EU, Asia. However, most of our engagements are, I'd say they're balanced, half of them between people that we know, because we expect every researcher to know what's going on, in the literature. And so they're well connected. And in fact, they have a tendency to connect back with the universities at which they got their degree, which is great. And in fact, we tend to build hiring pipelines. So it's a virtuous circle, right? The more employees we get from university, the more contacts we have, and the more employees we're like. At the same time, though, we do have I call it a semi-strategic approach, because it is flexible, to look at universities that are broad. 3M is broad. You referenced the periodic table that we have. And initially, I thought that was cutesy, right? But the purpose behind it is to show that just like elements, you can get more miracles, if you will, by combining elements and making molecules, complicated ones too. And that's what 3M does, is we combine those technologies to do something new that's never been done. Well, we're looking for universities that, in a sense, mirror 3M and that are, tend to be broad and interdisciplinary. So a lot of times the institutions we work with have these centers that are a combination of professors from are the ones that we find very effective at partnering with, because again, they're interdisciplinary like we are, they're broad like we are. And so the somewhat larger universities are the ones we look at for that way, because it's easier to find the research we want. And we're more successful at getting students that way to hire, because part of the intent of our research engagements is to develop that talent pipeline for us.
Thanks. There's a question for Arturo, but I actually would like to ask of all of you maybe to think about. Denny, you covered that a little bit from the 3M aspect, but if the question asks, let's say specifically to Siemens, how would a new university without an existing collaboration or an existing connection initiate an engagement with Siemens? And Leah and Georgia, I'd also maybe ask you as well, from your perspective, how would a new engagement potentially start?
Yeah, I think what we do, it goes a little bit along the lines of what Denny mentioned. Well, we have criteria that we identify on what we expect from our strategic partner universities. Competency in certain areas. We have a set of 12 technology fields that we focus on. So we map competencies in those areas. Because of that, we also tend to go to the large universities or universities with large, especially engineering departments. We're more easily find resources there. But we also use other metrics like number of hires or number of corporations, volume of research, things like that, which in a sense kind of self-fulfill, because our partner universities will be likely the ones that we will be working on or hiring students from. We did go through a greenfield review when we looked into the new ecosystem program, and we added other aspects like location or proximity to our plants or more research areas. So we went through that process and we identified those universities. In many cases, the same universities have been our partners, remain in there. We have a few universities that we are now developing that partnership. Those universities are actually not completely new to us. I mentioned before we have a bottom-up approach to working with universities. So even though we have strategic partner universities, we guide our researchers to go to them because we have those master research agreements. We have mechanisms. If somebody needs to work in a particular area that is uniquely, or a university has unique capabilities, we can add those universities to our partner list. Over time, those relationships grow. So when we did this analysis, we included some of those universities, or we brought those universities into the strategic partnership list. So I guess again, it's a bottom-up approach that ultimately will dictate what universities are part of that network. There's no top-down or high-level selection criteria or process that we use.
Leah, with the NC State University, one thing, for example, I've noticed, at least with your website, is it does seem quite user-friendly. And you also use terms like business-friendly, there's FAQs. It just makes it really, I would say, easy to find information. So just wondering as well, how, firstly, to the previous question around, how would someone maybe approach the university, or how would you initiate a new collaboration? But how much do you think does that outward-facing approach really, does it facilitate partnerships?
Thanks. I appreciate your feedback on that, because we have worked hard on our partnership portal. What we've noticed over the years is that there are some companies, admirably, who have identified university partnership as important to their innovation cycle. Siemens and 3M are exemplars in that area. But the majority of companies have never worked with a university before and have no idea for what that looks like or how to access it. So we want as much to be able to create relationships with the 3Ms and Siemens of the world as we do those companies for whom a university partnership is brand new to them. And so we're trying to open up ourselves in terms of making access to resources much easier. We are trying to make it clear how we collaborate and what those mechanisms look like for a company. And then we have a very easy interface so that companies can enter a short questionnaire as to what they are looking for, and we'll reach out to them within 24 hours to explore that conversation. And so we do spend a lot of time educating companies about what it looks like to work with a university like NC State. And so, there's this question about, what's the difference between a strategic partnership and, strategically building a partnership. And I guess, I would argue that all partnerships should be approached with strategy in mind. but not every single partnership is going to be strategic. And so, a company that approaches NC State because they want to hire our students is absolutely of interest to. I mean, that's our main product is our students. And so we want to pursue those opportunities with them, but then we want to also learn, about their priorities from a research and development perspective, whether that's testing and analysis or what that might look like. And then we're also trying to develop some, what I call cross-cutting areas of emphasis. And so, there are those competencies that have application across many industries, things like data science, sustainability, quantum computing. And so as much as we are developing, what you would imagine are those normal silos of excellence, we also are trying to develop those cross-cutting competencies and be able to deliver those in a way that is important to a variety of industries. And so we are, I'm glad to know that you found our website user-friendly, because that's absolutely what we are trying to deliver, and then to go from there.
Georgia, maybe a similar question to you around, ways of approaching the university, but also, the Research Innovation Commercialization Unit at the University of Melbourne. It's all about, being outward facing, being business friendly, and having these divisions that really help create the liaisons and the connections within the university. Having been with the university for a length of time, what role has that played in really driving engagement and partnerships?
So this touches on one of the questions that just came through the chat as well. So adding there, and I was asked, and that question, for everyone's benefit, was about how do we, as the University of Melbourne, communicate across divisions and faculties, and what tools might we use to do that? I might just, on the way quickly into that question, and just picking up the thread from colleagues on the panel, is that what really defines partnerships from strategic partnerships is the very purposeful pursuit, or the purposeful decision, strategic decision by the university in order to uplift what might be an active, vibrant partner to a level that is much more comprehensive across the university. So I'd describe us as having many, many partnerships, typically characterised at the individual researcher or research group level. It's when it lifts up to an interdisciplinary basis across the comprehensive university, either organically as the result, perhaps over decades, as a result of growing significant value for each party that has organically led to a strategic partnership. But particularly now, and going to the questions about what happens if you're new, or how do you target, in our case as a university, a new company, it is very purposeful. So, and I'd call out here that in recent years, we've also become very purposeful in terms of how we collaborate with our local governments at a city level. We're located in the city of Melbourne, and at our regional state government, and also with our Commonwealth governments. Together with them, we have identified priority industries, areas where Australia has competitive advantage, or where we're seeking to differentiate ourselves in particular ways, very much along the lines of our industry colleagues here speaking about their very present opportunities, but also from a university or a regional perspective, what's the sovereign capability, particularly now again in our context of global pandemic, when we've had such significant supply chain disruption. And if you're on the other side of the world, and tyranny of distance as you are for us here in Australia, those supply chains are very critical. So there's been a lot of purposeful review, and then a lot of analysis around the market analytics, who to pursue, and particularly Arturo for Siemens beautifully articulated, looking for those, in our case, looking for those industry partners who have the scope and scale to engage comprehensively with us. So as a comprehensive university, who has the scope and scale and appetite to engage, particularly in the research and development space. But Leah made a really, really important point. And for us, it's in recent years, and we've had some again, through our new strategy, we've got Advancing Melbourne 2030, and that also has a big focus around our spin-outs and our scale-ups. So how can we support our academic colleagues to develop their technologies nurtured from within the institution, and spinning them out of the university and supporting them within our ecosystem. That's what differentiates in today's conversation about strategic partners, and that's where they're purposeful. They may be serendipitous in their growth, but then they're very purposeful in their nurturing or in their targeting to trigger them in the first place. And we look for warm relationships wherever they may be in our organisation. Many of us through this conversation have noted our workforces are inherently moving. Our students are moving into these organisations and our greatest champions. And universities are often inherently, certainly here, are international. So that workforce, that community is an extremely rich and powerful one. And in terms of global mobility, I'd really like to again celebrate that as a real strength and contribution that the universities and this collaboration with our industry partners and government partners bring. The University of Melbourne has established something called Research, Innovation and Commercialisation. It's the largest division of its kind of an Australian university, and it's all about understanding deeply what is it that our partners are looking for in order to Leah's point, we're learning from the land-grant universities and other exemplars around the world. How can we do better at being more accessible and easier to do business with? And our innovation precincts are a very purposeful step, learning from our own organic experience through the Melbourne Biomedical Precinct, but how can we create environments, and we call them the activations, those services that can very engineered serendipity, how we can bring people together to have those spontaneous interactions that lead to those novel, the magic, as we've heard here, the magic of those new solutions when interdisciplinary groups come together, fired by passion and shared values.
Thank you for listening to today's discussion. Stay tuned for the next episode on the Strategic Partnerships podcast series. Don't forget to sign up for our podcast newsletter and follow UIIN on LinkedIn. If you have any feedback or comments for us, please reach out via office@uiin.org.